How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Pro Savings Days are back at Lowe's. My Lowe's Pro Rewards members save even more with limited-time doorbuster deals. Save $5 on 24-count Contractor's Choice 42-gallon trash bags, now just $14.78. Plus, get your choice select DeWalt Elite Series saw blades for $9.98. Not a Pro Rewards member? Join for free today at Lowe's. Valid through 9/17. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowes.com/terms for details. Subject to change.
Humans have been making and drinking beer in one form or another for a very long time. We're talking over 11,000 years at this point. Now, obviously, since that first batch was made, perhaps even accidentally, things have changed quite a bit, from the approaches we take to brewing to the ingredients that we use. As brewers in different regions develop their brewing skills, which was inarguably influenced by technology, a smattering of different styles hit the scene, many of which are still known today. And some of those styles took on a whole life of their own, spawning a bunch of unique substyles. You're listening to the Brülosophy podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me this week to discuss our views and opinions on the various shades of IPA is contributor Steve Thanos.
Good to be with you, Marshall, and talking about the various shades of IPAs. It has grown to be one of my favorite styles, although about 20 years ago or so, I probably would say something different. You know, our minds and our palates do evolve over time, and I'm sure within, the next 5 to 10 years, mine will change again. But I do have a fondness for IPAs.
Well, and I would imagine that you have at least some opinions about the different types of IPA, the fact there are so many different types of IPA. We're going to be getting into so much of that stuff. My love of craft beer started within a few weeks of me turning 21, which is just the legal drinking age here in the States. And the style that really did spur my obsession was IPA. Now, I lived in the Pacific Northwest at the time, and the IPA I was drinking then was, well, quite a bit different than the stuff that's around today. We'll just leave it at that. I have a feeling we're going to have some fun talking about our opinions on IPA today, possibly annoying some folks, but hey, that's what we're all about, and that's in the name. We're doing it all in the name of beer. So, as I point out every single time we do one of these Brews Views episode, this is a series where we do allow ourselves to be a bit more loosey-goosey than usual. So we might use language that some people aren't big fans of, share opinions you disagree with. That's all sort of the point of this series. So if you're not into that, well, this is your warning. So, all right, if you enjoy this show and you want to help us to continue producing it, please consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy, which you can do over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, not only are you helping to keep us around, but you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live brew day with a Brülosophy contributor. In fact, this month, Steve, you're going to be the one hosting the brew day out of your very own home brewery. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is. I'm looking forward to it. You're going to finally get the unveil the mask that we have with our brewing styles and our brewing practices, and kind of unleash what the secret is and everything. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
So many secrets. Yeah, it really is. We've done one of these already. Will was the one who hosted the first brew day, the Patreon brew day. Lots of fun. In addition to being, allowing us to show you how we brew and, kind of inviting you into our homes where we're doing all of this stuff. It's an opportunity for patrons just to kick it, like you would in a normal friend's brewery. And that's kind of what we want to develop, is this really cool community of people hanging out on brew days and such. So that's what we're doing for this month. Will be Steve hosting that Patreon Brew Day. You can learn more about all of the rewards that we offer for your support over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Huge props to all of our current patrons for their support. We really would not be here if it weren't for you. Another really easy way that you can help us out is by using the links found at Brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a very little kickback for the referral that helps us to keep covering the cost of running all of this stuff. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts that allows you to rate the shows, that'd be really awesome too. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who in addition to having a remarkable YouTube channel chock full of great brewing related content, sell what we believe to be some of the best electric brewing systems on the market. If you've been considering making the move from propane to electric, you really do owe it to yourself to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer. Whether you're after a 120 volt 5-gallon unit or something bigger like their powerful 240 volt 10-gallon system, Clawhammer has got you covered. Again, learn more about everything they have to offer over at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to check out their awesome YouTube channel as well. Listener Scott Housel from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, wrote in with a comment after listening to our recent bonus beer review episode. This is the one where a couple of our wives joined us to review the extra beers that members of the brew club sent in along with their average brew beers. Scott said, "I always enjoy your usual group of reviewers, but I really enjoyed hearing so many great and humorous comments from the ladies, and it sounded like they were really having fun. My wife, Melanie, does not like beer. Her favorite is a lime gosa I've made several times, but she'll still only have maybe a glass or two out of a batch. She tastes anything I brew and anything special that I convince her to try, but only once in a while will she finish the glass. There's talk about how to get a more diverse group of people into the hobby, and I've heard it said that when people see and hear, quote, someone like me talk about an interest like brewing, it sparks the thought of, hey, I'd like to try that. I don't even have to grow a beard. I also work as a hotel butler where the stereotype is still, quote, older white male, which is me. It's been great to watch a snowball effect of diversity happen. People actually used to say to me they didn't even consider applying before because of their color, race, gender, background, age, etc. It started with one non-stereotypical person. Now there's no majority in our group, and the shift was very organic and not forced at all. I guess my point is that hearing different voices having fun on your podcast was awesome and possibly inspiring. Steve, what do you think about what Scott's saying here?
I think the one thing that I take away the most is the idea of it being organic. I have listened to different talks with the AHA years ago, namely with Andy Johnson, and talking about how to diversify home brewing, and everyone that was up on the panel didn't really have an answer, unfortunately. And I don't begrudge them for not having an answer, because it is a difficult conversation, and one that doesn't lead us to many answers to our questions or what we're trying to accomplish, which I think is good. It's a step in the right direction. But at the same time, we all know that brewing does involve a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and also money. And not to say that money is something that has to be a reason for people not to get involved in it. But if you're going to do it, you're going to need to know that, going into it. So I think it has to happen organically. Someone has to want to do it. You can't just force people and say, for the sake of diversity, let's join a homebrew club. Now, for my experience as of late, my homebrew club is becoming a lot more diverse. I'll look around and I'll see, many more women attending meetings, getting involved in leadership roles. We actually have elections coming up in a couple of weeks. That may lead to more diversity in our club. So that's cool to see. But I think the key part is how it happens organically, and it just has to be what people want. But I think at the same time, people like us can do things where we do provide, that other side of the coin. You know what I mean? Like we can show that, there can be good conversations about beer and thoughtful responses and thoughts about it, and not just, oh, it's, inserts lame, sexualized beer name, here, which it irritates the hell out of me. So I think that's where we're not. And I'm very happy about that. It just comes with time, I think. So.
Yeah, but I'm with you though. It's a tough topic to tackle in part because we are the stereotype. So
yes,
there's this. I hate catch terms. I don't care what they are. I don't care if I actually agree with the premise that they're based on. But the term mansplaining, like it's such a stupid word. But yeah. I get where it's coming from, sure. And I feel like. When you take something like, let's just look specifically at women in brewing and home brewing and whatnot. By us trying to convince them to join us, I feel like there's an element, as opposed to being open to anybody joining, right? I feel like there's an element of like mansplaining behind that. And so for me, it feels like, you're just kind of walking a tightrope and not really knowing where to step. Now, for the sake of transparency, my asking the ladies to join us on that episode was at least partially motivated by my belief that our listeners would think even more non-beer drinkers reviewing beer would be funny. That's why I had them join us. And they were all hanging out for that Brews Views. For the Average Brew episode anyways. They were out swimming in the pool when we were recording that. We went out, ate dinner, and I said, hey, you guys think it'd be fun to go and just shoot the shit on a beer review episode? And, Michelle and Gail thought it would be fun. And so they joined us. The fact that had an impact to the point that people like Scott and his wife found it entertaining and maybe even inspiring. It sucks that wasn't the impetus for having them on. And I think it would be good. Now people will probably remember we did about, 6 or 7 months of episodes where Michelle, that's Tim's wife, and my wife, Laura, it was right after Jersey left where they did the beer reviews with Tim and me. And that got really good feedback as well. Here's the issue. And I know a lot of people that they look at folks like us, not just Brülosophy. I think this goes for anybody who has the weird narcissism to put their voice out there or whatever. I don't know. But they look and they're like, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just have more women on? Why don't you why don't you invite this type of person or this type of person or whatever? The reality is this, at least for Brülosophy, there was a point in time where Brülosophy, it was the rise. We were kind of homebrewing, or not just homebrewing, but craft beer, homebrewing, all of that stuff was very, very popular. And in that time, people were asking, like, are you going to quit your day job and be a content creator for homebrewing? And there was a part of me that was looking and going, God, could that be a possibility? Is that something that could happen? Where we're at today, I have to treat Brülosophy as a business of convenience, if that makes sense. Meaning, I use what's around me because I cannot invest the time and energy in this thing that doesn't pay. I mean, that's just the reality of it. If we can cover the costs, I'm happy right now. And we are just floating along. It's why we bring up Patreon so often. It's why I would love nothing more than to have such a wide net that we're able to just reach out to people and say, hey, I want you to come do this thing with us on this day. It's 4 days from now. But that's just we're not at that point as a business. And yes, we're still going. We're still producing content. We love it. That's what's keeping us here. But things are different today. And so I guess I say all of that in part as it sounds like I'm making excuses. But really what it is I love hearing feedback like Scott's because it inspires me to want to bring more people on and to do more new things. We've got ideas that we've been tossing around for just new content to keep things interesting with the hope that it does inspire more people who aren't yet brewing, regardless of what they look like, into the hobby, because we want this hobby to stay alive. So that's my soapbox response for you, Scott. I really do appreciate you reaching out. And that lime gosa sounds awesome. I would drink way more than 2 glasses of it.
Hell yeah.
I'm sure. So, well, if you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or drop us a note on social media. We'll be right back with our views on the various shades of IPA.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
Chilling work can be a chore, especially after a long brew day, but not with the Exhilarator Counterflow Chiller, which can chill a 5-gallon or 19-liter batch of wort in 5 minutes or less, leading to a strong cold break and clear wort in the fermenter. Brülosophy's Matt Del Fiacco uses the Exhilarator Max and absolutely loves it. In addition to improved chilling efficiency, every Exhilarator comes with a 5-year warranty that covers the entire chiller for manufacturer defects. If you're looking to up your chilling game and a CFC is right for you, head over to Exhilarator.com today.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
I love IPA. That's a statement I made many times in my early days of drinking and brewing, and I think for most people it was viewed as a relatively simple statement. These days, however, such a statement would likely be met with a question. What kind of IPA? The fact that there are so many different types of IPA is an issue that irks some brewers. In fact, we asked patrons of Brülosophy for their views on the topic, and we're going to be sharing these views throughout the episode. We'll be saving some for the end of each segment. If we didn't get to yours before, that just means that we didn't get your comment before we recorded, and I do apologize. But thanks to all of our patrons for their perspectives. Here we go. The first one comes from Richard Hart, who shared, "I'm probably in a minority here, but I hate the term IPA being used for all these different types of beer. Is it not possible to come up with new names? Friends will say, quote, I don't like IPA, but exactly what are they talking about?" I really feel like that goes along with what I was commenting on, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. If you said you liked IPA, people typically knew what you were talking about. Nowadays, it could mean so many different things. And so we have these kind of identifiers that we've attached to them to help give us an idea of what specific substyle, as I refer to them, of IPA, it is that somebody likes, or what you're making, or what you might be serving. So now I am a self-admitted neurotic, so I went ahead and I categorized each IPA substyle for the purposes of keeping this somewhat organized. And I think it seems to me, at least, that one of the earliest areas of experimentation when it comes to IPA, hops, we're going to get into that, but it had to do with strength, meaning the amount of alcohol, which we know also influences malt and hopping rates. So let's start there. Let's start with IPAs that are more or less defined, and at least by name, by their strength. So you've got your standard IPA, which according to the BJCP, puts you between about 5.5% and 7.5% ABV. Now, obviously, those 5.5%, the ones that are lower alcohol, some people are going to say, oh, that's more of a pale ale, because they focus specifically on strength as being the defining characteristic. Whereas some of us, like me, you can make a 5.5% standard IPA, and what that means is that you're dry hopping it. Whereas a pale ale, classically, you typically would avoid dry hopping. What are your thoughts on these different, strength IPAs?
I tend to like to live in the gray area with a lot of things, and to kind of see both perspectives and see kind of the middle range. And I kind of go back to the greatness that is the Green Can Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. If I were to drink that blindly, I might actually call it an IPA. And to be honest with you, it doesn't bother me. I don't feel like my beer brain, suffers, because of that, or my, what people might think is like my beer prowess. I don't think I have any, but whatever. My beer card needs to be rejected. It's hoppy. It's delicious. It's grainy. It's just a wonderful beer. And if you want to call it a pale ale, great. If you want to call it a IPA, great. I don't know. I just think that the, splitting hairs, really, it's beer. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The whole double, triple thing isn't unique necessarily, at least, to IPA. Imperial Stout is a stronger stout. That whole thing works for me. And again, if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, have you ever had a double IPA? Even if I was uninitiated in the world of beer, of craft beer, I with very little explanation, I would get what they were talking about. Oh, that's just a stronger version of an IPA. Okay, double IPA sounds good, makes sense. Even if it's not double the strength, it kind of makes sense. Now, just to stick with some standards here, the BJCP does list double IPA as a style in the guidelines that has between 7.5% and 10%. I believe they list it, but 7.5% and 10% ABV. So then the question though becomes, well, then what about triple IPA? And what about quadruple IPA? I had a friend who made a quadruple IPA. It was like 14% ABV, and that's just what they called it. So is that something that you're, a fan of? Does it make sense to you? Those are not included in the BJCP, which is the reason I'm asking, if somebody starts calling something a triple IPA, which we've seen, I think I've even seen it on store shelves, is that a thing?
So yeah, with double IPAs, actually that was part of the reason why I really got into home brewing was because I was drinking these double IPAs from a local brewery that I won't name the name of, and they came across to me, to my palate, as very harsh and very harsh hop characteristics. Maybe this is like the early days of like hop creep. I don't know. But it wasn't very appealing. And I wanted to brew something that I enjoyed and didn't have this harshness in the back end of the palate. So that's why double IPAs became like my mission, basically. And then I brewed Den of Iniquity, which is a beer that I've won awards with and is a very just classic mosaic hopped double, or it's probably a single, sometimes I've made it to a double IPA, but kind of on the lower end, like the 7.5%, 8% range. For a double IPA, it's pretty low. But yeah, I mean, I fell in love with that, and I tend to think that triples and quadruple IPAs are a little bit much, although my friends over at Workforce make a fantastic triple IPA that's about 10%, I think, called Rainbow Things. It comes right out during the month of June for Pride Month, and it is fantastic. Unfortunately, with the way my view is on consuming beer these days and going to the gym and trying to be healthy, I don't consume that much of it anymore. But I do have a fondness for that beer because it is fantastic.
Yeah. That's awesome. And have you ever, so I mentioned earlier that I have friends, a local friend who made a quadruple IPA. I mean, is that something you've ever, I just feel like it's homebrewers having fun. And
yeah.
So in terms of the strength, it just doesn't bother me. I get it because it's descriptive.
I think it's correctly named. I think it's something that, yeah, homebrewers will totally have fun with that. Just like I had fun with brewing a beer that had 215 IBUs. To most people's palates, and rightfully so, that's probably disgusting. I get that. My palate now probably would reject it. But you know, that's the nature and that's the fun about homebrewing. And kind of go full circle from our conversation earlier during the comments section. That's something that I think we can stress with newer homebrewers. Like, hey, do you want like total control of what you drink? Then here, this is the hobby that you want, you know? So that's something, I don't know. Just to get people excited about, you know, brewing, no matter who you are and what your background is and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, so. No, that's exactly it. And I think you're going to hear this a lot in this episode, that in terms of the naming convention, I don't think either of us have a big issue with the names. People, when we do, we'll bring it up. I think if there's anything that we're going to get a little bit contentious about, maybe it's the fact that there are so many versions, that kind of like what our first commenter said about, you know, why are we just slapping the IPA label on it? It almost feels a little bit like it's got there's an air of marketing in it. Like, oh, if you put IPA, it'll sell. You know what I mean? And so I do wonder that sometimes.
But is there anything wrong with that?
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. Yeah. So what, you know, if it's descriptive, particularly when we're talking about, you know, strength, I'm kind of like, you make a sextuple IP. I don't care if it's 25% ABV. That kind of gives us an idea of what you're going to be getting. Exactly. And then when you put IPA, like when I hear IPA, I guess we could have started with this, but when I hear IPA, I think hoppy. I think very, very hoppy. Does that mean that if I make a Saison that's dry hopped, it's a Saison IPA? I mean, I'm kind of surprised people didn't call dry hopped Saison IPA. You know what I mean? Because they're slapping the IPA label on everything else. Why not? I do think, or what I should say, I suppose, is that I understand the argument that with so many different versions of IPA, it does kind of muddy the waters a little bit. It can make things a little bit confusing. But again, no hate from my end because of that. That doesn't bother me. Now, another way it seems IPA often gets delineated is by the region from whence it originated, or from where it originated. As most people listening are aware, IPA proper got its start in England. What are your thoughts on classic English IPA. And before we get into our opinions, there is some misunderstanding about the origins of IPA. And I feel like I'm not the best person to speak to it. Mitch Steele would probably be the better person to talk to about it. That this whole idea of IPA just being, started in England and it was for shipping across. Yes, there's some truth to that, but there's more to it as well. Anyways, when I think of the origins of IPA, my brain automatically goes to English IPA. What are your thoughts on that style?
I will totally admit that I will romanticize this notion to my death. Sitting in a pub or just a really cool bar and sipping an English IPA. That's with some good friends, some good food. It's a pretty good night in my eyes, and I know it's not going to be something I'm going to get totally drunk off of, and I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the flavor and the nuances of it. I'm not totally sold on the style itself, but I do like I said, the romanticized notion of an English IPA, because it's so different than what we're used to here in America, with the very overly citrus, and I love American IPAs. So it is something that's a little bit more subdued, something that's subtle, that's not going to beat you over the head. And I think for the purists out there, that's the style to gravitate towards.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, I appreciate English IPA for what it started, because I love IPA. I've had all of the different substyles that we're talking about today. I have tried versions of that I've actually enjoyed. I mean, that's not to say that I love them, that they're my favorite. There's one or two that I'm probably never going to make on my own. But yeah, sure. I agree. English IPA, the history of it is what really I think I find enticing and very interesting. That being said, the only English IPA I ever had that I truly enjoyed enough to want a second pint of was a Fuller's. It was during the homebrew con that was in Minneapolis. We went to this amazing English pub. God, I forget what it's called, Bart's or something like that. And they had this just phenomenal spread of classic, traditional English beers on tap, and I was lucky enough to have an English IPA made by Fuller's off of a beer engine, and maybe it was just the nice experience of being I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, not my favorite of the IPA styles. I love English hops, but in very specific usages. I like to use Fuggle over EKG. I'm not a big fan of marmalade, and I get a lot of marmalade from EKG. But when I'm using Fuggles, even if it's for, an American IPA, I'm usually putting it like mid-boil to try to up that umami kind of thing. I get a kind of a mushroom thing from Fuggles. So it's not like I'm dry hopping with these English hops, and that's not really my favorite characteristics. That being said, I do enjoy a good English IPA, sure. Just not my favorite of the other styles. Now, in terms of other regions, obviously, and I think we could argue that right after English IPA came the American IPA. The biggest difference is being, one, American IPA tended to have more strength. Some could contend that English IPA is what we might call a session IPA over here in the States, given the sessionable nature of that lower ABV. But as when I think of American IPA, my brain I'm so curious where you're at, because American IPA to me is become the umbrella term, under which there are, I think, 1,600 different versions of IPA, right? So, but American IPA, the classic American IPA, like you said, is sort of just a stronger version of Green Label, of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and they have their Torpedo, and there are these other kind of classic versions of IPA that, to my palate, tended to have a little bit more malt character than what we're seeing today as being the more popular substyle of IPA. Tended to be more bitter and have less of that hop flavor, though I think even those classic recipes have probably been updated over the decades to kind of, increase the hoppy punch while, dialing back some of the bitterness. But before we get into the American regional versions of IPA, what are your thoughts when you think of American IPA? What comes to mind?
When I think of American IPA, I automatically think of citrus flavored hops, a solid malt backbone, if you will, clean yeast fermentation, and just all the glory of hops. There's really not a whole lot of wrong in my eyes with the American IPAs. But yeah, it's good. I like it.
Yeah. And it's a classic. I mean, like I've told the story before that when I turned 21, it might have even been the day I turned 21, I went to Boundary Bay Brewing Company, which sadly I hear is going under.
That sucks.
It would be amazing if they were able to kind of keep something going, and maybe they've updated, what's going on already by the time of this episode dropping. But yeah, they had like 3 IPAs on tap. This was back in the early 2000s. And they were just so fun to drink. I loved the hops, but back then, and this is the first regional breakout that I'm going to go into. What I remember of IPA was it being like, you said citrusy. Yes. Like grapefruit rind citrusy is what I recall. But
Right.
even more than that was this just like piney, insanely bitter beer. For those who drank beer in the Pacific Northwest back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you might remember, I believe Red Hook had what's called Longhammer IPA.
Yes.
That beer.
Really cool bottle.
Oh,
Remember
badass
those bottles?
bottle.
Those were
But-
so badass.
That beer would rip the goddamn enamel off of your teeth with how bitter it was. And
Yes.
I remember thinking that's what IPA was. And
Yeah.
the first 2 or 3 batches of IPA I made were what I would classify now as a Pacific Northwest or PNW or a Northwest IPA. They were just insanely bitter. We're talking like 125 IBU, which can you even detect that? I tend to think you can. And then maybe you dry hop it with like a half ounce of Cascade or something. But really it was like, who's going to make the strongest, most bitter beer? And to get that, you have to add a lot of hops. So you see kind of the IPA aspect of it. Funny story, the very first beer that I brewed when I moved to California, I'm in grad school, so I put homebrewing on a hiatus. As soon as I got my job, where I'm still work to this day, I started brewing with my buddy Chris, and the very first beer that we made was my American IPA recipe that I developed 6 years prior. And it was, I remember I'd been drinking a whole bunch of great, local, what we're going to get into in a minute here, West Coast IPAs here in California, which were vastly different. But in my mind, I didn't quite put the pieces of the puzzle together. We made this beer, had some friends and family over for a barbecue, and I'm telling you, everyone commented on how insanely bitter this thing was. It was so freaking bitter. And I've never brewed that style again. I wouldn't say it's my favorite type of IPA, but do you know what I'm talking? It sounds like you've had Longhammer at least, and kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Yes, I've had Longhammer before. I actually fell in love with their Winter Warmer as well, which spawned my creation of Clark's Winter Warmer. Shout out to the great movie with the Griswolds. But yeah, I do remember those beers, and they were definitely something that's I think evolved over time, and I think that's the beauty of the IPA is how it's evolved over time. And we give so much shit about hazy IPAs, and there's no bitterness, and blah blah blah, and it looks like crap sometimes. I get it. And maybe some would argue that it's not evolving, but devolving. Okay, fine. I can understand that. But I don't know. It's interesting how much the style has changed over time. And yeah, I remember that beer specifically, Longhammer, and it was damn good.
But I'll never forget with that one, Steve. I went out and bought a 6-pack. I think it was like the months leading up to my wife and my wife and I getting married. And, we were going to her parents' house, my in-laws now, for something. And I stopped by the store on the way over and I picked up a 6-pack of Longhammer. And, I love drinking with my father-in-law. He's a Coors Light guy, through and through. And I show up and he's like, yeah, open one of those for me. I'll give it a go. He had tried my homebrew before and, wasn't the biggest fan. Yeah. And so I crack one of these bottles for him and he took a drink. And to this day, the face that he made, it's burned into my brain. He was like, how on earth that tastes? I think what he said is it tastes like deck stripper, like paint stripper. I'm like, dude, I get it though. I totally get it. And
I get it too, but I like that. I drink my coffee black with no sugar, no cream. That's just the way I like it. There are certain tastes, there's certain things that I enjoy that some people don't. So yeah, I get it, but teach their own, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Now, obviously, we had this American IPA, which I classify as being a bit more malty, less bitter than this Pacific Northwest IPA. And then, if sticking on the West Coast for now, at least, we have what is very commonly referred to these days as West Coast IPA. Now, the way I conceive of West Coast IPA is no crystal malt. We're ditching all of that malt character. Mm-hmm. And then in place of that crazy enamel peeling bitterness, you're dialing that down significantly, which equates to moving your hop additions to later in the kettle or later in the entire process, really, and really just trying to extract as much of the hoppy goodness, the flavor and aroma characteristics of the hops rather than the bitterness. You're really trying to get that into the beer as opposed to just the bitterness. And my heart is in West Coast IPA. That is not an official designation. It's something that I would imagine the BJCP might consider adding, given how often that term is used, might consider adding in the next update of the guidelines. But I think you say West Coast IPA to anybody and they know exactly what you're talking about. Pretty much any IPA, modern IPA from brewers, on the West Coast that has been, of course, copied by brewers in other regions as well. But we're talking super pale yellow, almost looks like a Pilsner, 6.5%, 7% alcohol, and just hop character to the moon. My favorite of the regional styles.
I would probably agree with that somewhat, although I think there are other types that I like more, which we'll be talking about next. But I do appreciate a good West Coast IPA. I think back to Ballast Point back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. They always had a decent West Coast IPA.
Sculpin, I believe is what it's called. Yeah.
Sculpin was good. Yes. And then that just kind of evolved and kind of just took off everywhere, no matter where you are in America. Out here in the Chicago area, we had Pipeworks come out with their series Ninja versus Unicorns, which I believe could be something else. Maybe I'm mistaking or misremembering, to quote Roger Clemens. I don't know, but it was a really decent IPA. I know Half Acre makes some really good IPAs out here in Chicago area. Again, I'll throw it out to my friends out at Workforce. They have one. What was it called? Formerly known as. They had a nicely written cease and desist letter written to them about the name, so they had to change the name. Formerly known as seems to be the right rename of that. It's still a classic beer and still awesome. And that's what's those are the IPAs that I kind of gravitate towards. Yeah.
I have a feeling that in this day and age that when you just say IPA, that I think probably, at least where I live, a lot of people's minds, a good portion probably go to West Coast IPA. Another good portion are probably going to go to Hazy IPA, which, trust me, we'll get to that one.
Oh, yeah.
Right now we're talking about these regional breakdowns. So again, West Coast IPA, you got your super pale, no crystal malt, very little malt character overall. Tons of good hop character with balanced bitterness, if not, lower bitterness than one might expect in a classic American IPA. Now, we've got to get to the regional IPA that is your favorite, in part because of where you live, Steve. Tell us about Midwest IPA.
It is the Midwest IPA. And I have always been one to kind of gravitate towards the Midwest IPA. And yeah, it's not really a style. We get it. We'll get a ton of feedback on this. It's not a style. It's not in the BJCP guidelines. Well, we hope Gordon is listening to this, and we hope that maybe one day he'll put it in the updated version.
Hey, Gordon, listen. Gordon's a good friend. He's a great guy. I don't know if I have any influence over him, but
I don't know either. But I do know that that it would be awesome if Midwest IPA got in there. But for those of you who don't know it, it is a IPA that has a really strong malt backbone. Crystal malt is added. I will live firmly with that belief, even though that you and Jordan will give me shit about that every chance you all get.
Just the thought of drinking one kind of makes me goosebumpy.
I love it. I love it. But it just kind of harkens back to having the kind of the best of both worlds. Like you want to have a malty beer, but you also want to have a hoppy beer. So it's kind of the best of both. And I'm very content with adding and continue to add crystal malt. Half an ounce for a kind of a normal 5 to 7% version, and then if I'm doing a bigger one, double IPA, I'll usually throw in a full pound of crystal malt and just let it have its fun. And I love the color. I love the flavor, the sweetness. I think it marries well with some of the hops that we're using these days. And to me, it solidifies what an IPA is. But again, it's evolved over time. Like I was drinking the Longhammer ones that were, ripping the enamel off of our mouths, like you were talking about before, and enjoying that. But at the same time, and then West Coast kind of came out and they were like, okay, let's dial it back a little bit. And so, we kind of see the evolution of where the IPA is these days with the Hazy IPA, which we'll get to in a little bit. So, it all makes sense. And I think that the variety is what makes it all interesting. There needs to be variety. There needs to be something because we're not all the same. We're not all, drinking the same types of beers. So
yeah, and it makes it fun. Now, when I think of Midwest IPA, the people will say, well, if it's got a malt backbone, that just sounds like the original kind of classic American IPA or even English IPA. But it's different,
oh yeah.
When the Midwest IPA, so people will say, oh, so basically any IPA made by these Midwest breweries like Bell's or Founders. No, that's not the case at all. Most of them, in my opinion, are making styles of IPA that I would classify as your kind of classic Americans leaning into that West Coast IPA. Mm-hmm. They're not super malty. A Midwest IPA, you have to imagine the sweetness that you get, whether it's actual sweetness or just perceived sweetness, but that's that character that you get from like a Crystal 40 to Crystal 60 with fruity hops does create this kind of impression of sweet fruitiness. And it absolutely makes sense to me how people would find that appealing.
Oh yeah.
I view it through the context of my IPA preference, which is, or beer preference really, which is dry, hop forward, and that crackery malt as opposed to that crystal malt. Now, I've absolutely had some Midwest IPA that was like oxidized. People often think of oxidation as just being an issue with Hazy IPA. That's not true. It's any beer really, but when it comes to IPA, I think all of them have a higher risk of being oxidized.
Sure.
It's one of the lower versions of IPA styles that I in my preference list, but it can be done well. A lot of people will say, oh, you got a mash warmer because you want the residual sweetness from that higher FG. I don't even think that's necessary. I was just emailing with somebody, or I might have been responding to a Reddit comment or something about somebody brewing an IPA, and I had comment, and they had said something about, make sure you mash really low so that the beer doesn't end up sweet. My comment was, well, I'm no longer convinced that mash temp is a great way to regulate or modulate sweetness, but it is a good way to modulate ABV because, the warmer you mash, the less fermentable it's going to be. So that's where my brain sticks when it comes to Midwest IPA as well, is that it's a little bit sweeter, but that sweetness is not a function of process. It's a more function of ingredients. And I know plenty of people, you're not the only one, Steve, who really just love Midwest IPA. It always gets me thinking is there something about the Midwest? You guys have your super bitter cold winters and these hot, muggy summers based on what I've been told. Does that influence our beer preferences in some way? Or is it just that people there wanted to have their name, very broadly speaking, their name attached to a type of an IPA that somehow got popular in that region? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting. I
can see the latter being more prevalent because I think that there is a overall perception of, and you disagree with me, that's fine. You can email me with all the comments of Chicago being the little brother to New York, right? And New York is one, Chicago is two, and now the LA people will be coming at me, of course, and that's fine. I kind of see the Chicago. Yeah, we do want our Midwest to be noted, and we want it to be on the boards and whatnot. So I get it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's for everybody, but I think when a Midwest IPA is done well, that's one style that I'll always gravitate towards.
Yeah, and again, I've had examples of what people refer to as Midwest IPA that I'm perfectly happy with. It's just if I'm given the option to choose between that and a West Coast IPA, I'm going West Coast IPA every time. That's just preferential. So again, we're still kind of under the umbrella of regional variations of IPA. The final one that I could think of is Belgian IPA, which is an odd one because people don't typically associate Belgium with IPA. You've got when you hear Belgian ale, you already know right off the bat that it's going to be primarily a fermentation character. That's what's going to be driving the characteristics of that beer. Well, when it comes to Belgian IPA, that is still true. The idea was make your regular American IPA, ferment it with Belgian yeast, and let's see where we go. Now, I've seen Belgian IPA. I've actually had Belgian IPA made in Belgium at Belgian breweries, craft breweries, where they're using European or continental hops, which I find very interesting. This is one of the very few that I have not had a version of that I enjoy. I just don't think that Belgian fermentation character just goes well with bitterness and hops, or fruity hops at the very least. I believe you could technically classify Stone Brewing's Cali Belgique, which I don't even know if they make that anymore, as like a Belgian IPA. And if you've ever had that, more power to you if you liked it. I thought it was nasty.
I brewed a Belgian IPA once, and I used Calypso hops, which I got from Yakima Valley, and they were very apple and pear forward. And then I used I believe it was from White Labs. It was I could be wrong about the number, so don't hold me to it, but like the difference between two of their Belgian strains, it was like a 500 or 550. And I still remember this vividly, having this conversation with a really well-received beer judge who was in our homebrew club for a while, that has since moved on, and he was critiquing my beer, and I was really kind of interested in what he thought because I really respected his opinion and his palate, and he was very complimentary of it. Although I think the one thing that I was upset about for my own liking was that he didn't get the yeast strain right, and it could have been even better. And this was like back in like 2015. I had been brewing for about a year, so I was like, what the hell what do you expect? You're gonna it doesn't have to be perfect right away. But I can still vividly remember Calypso hops and whatever yeast strain that White Labs had out at that time would have been the perfect marriage. And I never went back to the recipe. Overall, Belgian IPAs, I can take it or leave it. I'm not going to actively seek it out commercially because I don't think there's a lot out there. Nor am I going to go out and make one, because most of my time with brewing these days is very Brülosophy centric. So maybe I can do like a DIY version of a Belgian IPA one day. I don't know. But it's fun. I think out of all the different types of shades of IPA, it's probably going to be on the bottom. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, you and me both, my friend. Just not that convergence of Belgian yeast character with hops and bitter, like that's just not my thing. So
I think overall, if you do it well and put some thought into it, like you can't just throw like a whole bunch of Citra in it. Where in an American IPA, it's gonna be pretty good. You kind of have to put some thought into it, I think, and that's where I was kind of leaning towards with the Calypso hops, because it kind of matched well with how I perceived the Belgian yeast strain and the fruity esters that would come out, and then the phenols of the clove and whatnot. So it's interesting. Again, not my favorite though.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I absolutely love hoppy saison or dry hop saison. Delicious to me. So there's something different about saison yeast and these classic, Chimay or Westmalle yeast that you get from White Labs and Imperial Yeast and all these labs. They're different. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's expectation. I don't quite know, but again, not my favorite. Now we do have some comments I want to get to from patrons. We sprinkled some in already. I really want to give as much credit to our patrons as possible. So the first one comes from Josh Gonzalez. He says, I don't care for the newer variations of IPA. I'm not into hazy IPA. I feel like some of these have gotten really out of hand. Belgian IPA is okay, but I'm not sure I agree with those two styles mixing together. I'll take a classic or West Coast IPA any day. Love me some Bell's Two Hearted, 60-minute Mosaic. Yeah, I agree with Josh. I think mostly I don't. It's not that I don't care for the newer variations of IPA, like Josh said. I think it's kind of fun to see the next new thing somebody came out with. It sounds like he and I are more or less on the same page.
I think so too. I'll join that party and buy the first round.
There you go.
I have a can of Bell's Two Hearted actually in my fridge that I will be cracking open tonight because I've had it and I am looking at it every day when I walk into the fridge. So
yeah,
I'm gonna indulge a little.
Yeah.
It's a great beer. So
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the better, in my opinion, one of the better commercial examples of what I would just refer to as a nice American IPA. I think it's absolutely delicious.
For sure.
Lee Cox says the term IPA has been used for a catch-all for so many styles that bear little or no resemblance to one another. Personally, I'm a fan of the classic West Coast style IPA. The fact that he attaches classic to West Coast IPA to me is very telling. But he says, I don't care for hazy IPA for the most part, and I really enjoy a good rye IPA and black IPA. All of those styles we will be addressing in the next segment, I promise. But yeah, what do you think about what Lee had to say?
I think Lee is another one that will be joining the party. I agree with him. It's something that I think my palate has gotten accustomed to, especially the last comments about a good rye IPA and a black IPA, which we'll get to later. But yeah, classic. I like that word classic. It does sort of stick out a little bit, and this coming from someone who loves the Midwest IPAs. So, Lee, I do share your not caring for hazy IPAs. I'm there too. I just made a comment actually about one hazy IPA on social media a couple days ago. The guys over at my brain doesn't work sometimes. I can't think of the name. Old Irving Brewery out in Chicago. They have a fantastic hazy IPA called Beezer. It's right around the 7-8% mark. And I told them this is one of the only hazy IPAs that I would actually really enjoy. And it's damn good. Have you tried that before? Have I given you a sample of that?
Not that I can recall,
okay.
but
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
but I'm
good.
like you. Yeah, we're going to talk more in depth. We've done a whole episode on Hazy IPA, Brews Reviews already, years ago. But we'll get more into that in a minute. But I have had Hazy IPA that I enjoy for the most, at least that one pint that I drink. So, all right, let's do more comments. We got one from Jim who says probably a couple 3 points. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but he says, he's making 3 points. He says, 1, IPAs sell and all of my local breweries lean into them hard. They're not going away soon. 2nd, I enjoy IPA and I enjoy beer. I thoroughly appreciate the variety out there from Treehouse to Alvarado Street Brewery. Sure, I'll hit one that doesn't taste good to me, but oh well. 3rd, if it's not your glass of beer, don't order one. Most places offer a variety of styles. Relax, enjoy your beer and some college football. I'm more of an NFL guy, Jim, but yeah, that is just kind of more of a general statement on. It sounds like he's kind of speaking to the people who just like to hate things, and one of those being that there's a ton of different types of IPA. No, I'm with you, Jim.
Right. Yeah, I am too. It's, either that or order something else or find another place to go to, There's nothing wrong with that. They're going to be back. You're going to go back to that place and they'll have something else that you'll like and support them then. But to just sit there and to talk bad about a brewery who are just trying to, put food on their table and provide for their family. I kind of take that to heart, and because I know brewers who are doing that for a living, and that to me is more important than any of our, simpleton diatribes about beer and beer culture and all this other stuff. Like, at the end of the day, people are just trying to make money and, live their life. Who am I to shit on what they're making? If I don't like it, shut up and drink something else.
Well, yeah,
that's it.
And there are people there who do like it, and that's
yes.
So what?
Yeah.
So what if people have different preferences?
Right.
I mean, I don't know why we get all up in arms about that. So
I think homebrewers tend to get lost in that whole forgetting that they're making money off of it. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that it's their livelihoods. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. And no matter where you go, they're not just going to have Hazy IPA. So, all right, final comment for this segment comes from Stephen Wade, who says, I'm a huge IPA fan. The style keeps changing and evolving. I grew up on Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which used to be the standard for Pale Ale, but I would bet if you gave drinkers a blind taste test today, they would put it in the IPA category. I'm on the East Coast, and my favorite is Heady Topper, which was kind of the OG, what he refers to as any IPA or New England IPA. I believe nowadays Hazy IPA kind of is the term we use for that. But he says now it wouldn't fit in the Hazy IPA style, which has evolved to be a bit less bitter and more sweet. I love the IPAs coming out of Tired Hands in Philadelphia, Treehouse and Trillium in Massachusetts, Fiddlehead in Vermont. But there are many other great IPAs on the East Coast, including Fidens, Industrial Arts, and Sapwood Cellars. Sapwood Cellars, of course, is Scott Janish and Michael Tonsmeyer. Session IPAs are very challenging to make because the lower ABV is hard to get balanced with lots of hopping. Tired Hands makes a delicious session IPA. Cheers, Steven says. Yeah, he's really tapping into the sentiment I think a lot more people share that you and I might not, but that, all of those breweries that he listed are on the East Coast and are kind of known for their Hazy IPA, which will be the first, I promise you, it will be the first IPA that we address in the next segment. But overall, I'm with you, Steven, that the more versions that come out, to me, when you attach IPA to it, all you're doing is telling people out there, hey, if you like hops, this is going to have that for you. Now, it might be different based on the descriptor that we put in front of IPA, but that's okay. It that just kind of guides your thinking about it.
Right. And I think that more and more I think about it is probably more of a marketing thing that, everything gets labeled an IPA because we know what sells. We know what the people want, right? So I'm not going to get too caught up in that. But yeah, I do share Steve's sentiment about session IPAs. They're a bitch to make. I don't dabble in those too often. I'll take a pale ale any day anyway. So I think that's where my palate kind of lies. But yeah, the whole chasing the perfect session IPA, it's just not worth it to me anymore.
Just make a pale ale. I know.
Yeah.
I actually do like a good session IPA, and I think there are some insanely good commercial examples out there. So, a little bit of a challenge to make it, but I feel like with some basic understanding of bitterness and how hops contribute to that, you can get away with it. Now, Lee did hit on a couple of styles that we're going to be addressing as soon as we're back from this break.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brülosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of work, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today.
I've got Dan Morgan here on the pod. Say hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going good, man. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Dan Morgan. I'm an attorney and a managing partner at Morgan & Morgan, which is America's largest injury law firm.
That's pretty awesome. I think I saw a billboard of yours recently that said 20 billion won. 20 billion is an insane number.
Yeah, 20 billion recovered. It's actually, I think, somewhere north, probably closer to 22, 23 after this year. And each year we get bigger and badder and our army grows. So the number will hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on.
Awesome. So how does someone get in contact with Morgan & Morgan? What would I do if I got into an accident?
Probably the easiest way is dialing pound law. That's pound 529 from your cell phone. We are always open. Our call center is always waiting to take your call. 24/7, 365.
Wow. Dan Morgan from Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Thanks for coming by the show.
Thanks for having me. Visit forthepeople.com for an office near you.
Up until, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or so, most people had a decent idea of what IPA looked like, right? But these days, it would be much more difficult to conjure an accurate image because there are just so many different versions. For this reason, the next category we're going to be focusing on are IPAs that tend to be defined by the way they look, starting with the big dog on campus and promises made, promises kept, Hazy IPA, which was originally, at least by my conception, referred to as New England IPA because of the region where it originated. Now, if that name had stuck, I promise you we would have included it in the section on regional. Believe me, I was stressed out about where to include this one because of my neuroses. But I do feel like Hazy IPA is actually the more, when people first started calling it that, I thought, oh, it's like a nickname, whatever. But it really does seem to have taken off as being the kind of standard by which people refer to this style. And so that's what I'm sticking with. It's also very accurate because the one thing New England IPA was known for, if anything, was just how insanely hazy it was, which if you ask people who love Hazy IPA will tell you that it's purely a function of process. It's not a function of bad brewing or mistakes or anything like that. And just, we all know this already, but Hazy IPA, where your classic, American IPA was bitter and somewhat, malt forward and had, some of that classic kind of, I would call it like bitter citrus fruit character. Hazy IPA flips that on its head. It reduces that bitterness down to basically nothing. And it is the idea is to make a glass of beer that tastes like fruit juice. I think that's a fairly accurate description. Personally, I've talked about it before. I'll drink it. It's not my favorite. I would much rather have a crisp, clear, clean West Coast IPA than Hazy IPA all day of the week. But again, people have this idea that I hate it because I don't love it. No, I just don't love it, but I'm okay with it.
I'm with you. I don't love it. Like I've alluded to before, Beezer from Old Irving is really good. I think what Workforce is doing these days with their hazy IPAs, they're adding a little bit more bitterness to it, which I like. So I can kind of get over my the cloudiness or the haziness of it and just kind of enjoy it for what it is. And I'm sure there's other ones that I'm not thinking of right now that I've enjoyed over the time. But yeah, it's not my favorite style. It's not something that I've always gravitated towards. But I've found the argument against it to be exhausting. And
yes. Oh my God.
It's just again, it's just beer. It's not that serious, guys.
Get over it. Jesus.
Get over it and move on.
Who cares? Yeah. And it's weird because, again, maybe because we, put our voices out there and do all of that. I have been accused of being one of the people who isn't getting over. I've never given a shit. I don't know. I just don't care about these things. If I have a controversial opinion about it, it's that I don't give a shit. That's where I'm at,
Yeah, I think it's the climate in which we're in. I think that if someone is like that apathetic gray area isn't very well received or celebrated. It's the I want you to really hate it or I want you to really love it. Stand on it, Marshall. And I don't care enough about it to really have an opinion anymore. It's like the old exhausted diatribe about Miller Lite and Coors Light and stuff like that. Hey, if you want to drink it, you know what? More power to you. I will drink a banquet beer any day, especially if someone's paying for it, and I will wear my Coors shirt to go along with it, and I'm happy about that. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. It's not a big deal. And it's funny because I've had friends and I'm certainly one to own that bias, real bias is subconscious. It's not like you're actively, the harder you try not to be biased or claim that you're not biased, the more I know that you are biased, that there is an inverse relationship there. I own that maybe my conception of Hazy IPA is driven by some level of bias based on whatever. I've had people from, an excellent brewers, good folks, folks that are really well known in the beer world, send me versions of their Hazy IPA, like commercial brewers. And their whole thing is, yeah, I know you're not a big fan, but let this one change your mind. And I haven't changed my mind yet.
Yeah.
There is just a quality to that style of beer. I get kind of a chalky feel in my mouth. I think a lot of people perceive that as being like a softer mouthfeel. I don't like that. I want it to get in there and get out of there. That's kind of my thing. Now, in my opinion, one of the worst versions of Hazy IPA, and I've never had one that I genuinely enjoy, I've never been able to finish a full pint of it, is Milkshake IPA, which again was explained to me by somebody who brews Milkshake IPA is going to be a hazy IPA with lactose added. So you're adding sweetness to this beer that I already perceive as being sweet, you know?
Yeah.
Not my thing. Now, a lot of milkshake IPA, I don't see them on tap very often anymore, not as much as like 5 years ago, but they'll add like fruit to them and try to doctor them up. And I know that they're trying to tap a very specific market, people who maybe don't like beer flavored beer. More power to you. I love that, seeing that people who aren't into the styles of beer that I'm into still coming out to the pub or the brewery and enjoying them, drinking the beer that they do enjoy. So by all means, keep doing it. I think it's awesome. It just doesn't work with my palate.
I think I've had one or 2 ounces of a milkshake IPA, and I'm not exaggerating. It was given to me by a member of my homebrew club once. We were out somewhere or at his house or something, I forget. And it was like very strawberry forward. It would not my favorite. And I had literally had like 1 or 2 ounces of it, and I put it down and moved on.
You're like, okay. Thanks, but no thanks.
Thanks for no thanks. Yeah, it was not something that I wanted to drink, and I could not imagine drinking a whole pint of it, yet alone 2 ounces of it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this: I share your experience, and I will drink anything. That sounds weird, but
me too.
Especially if a friend of mine brewed it, I will drink it with you.
Yes.
The cool thing about that, it's usually you're sharing one can between like 5 or 6 people. So all you're getting is a little sample. I had a good friend of mine. We were hanging out at Crow and Wolf, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago. And a buddy of ours showed up, and he had brewed this blueberry milkshake IPA thing. And you know what? The 2 or 3 the 2 or 3 ounces that I drank, it tasted like what he intended. It tasted like a blueberry sweet, treat. And cool. I said, great job. You did a killer job. I don't hate the fact that you made this. I'm good with not having any more of it.
Exactly.
It's like dessert, though. I don't eat dessert. I'm a savory. So I don't. And if I'm going to eat dessert, I'm having 2 or 3 bites of pie or ice cream, and I'm good to move on. I don't need any more. That's sort of how I perceive the whole milkshake IPA. Now, our good friend and patron Eric Pierce had a comment that I want to include in this section. He says, I'm one of those guys who abandoned the IPA back when brewers just kept trying to outdo one another by making one bitter bomb after another. You're welcome, Eric. I was one of those guys for a while. Thankfully, there was a whole world of Belgian ale to explore. Then any IPA, again, hazy IPA, came along and brought me back into the world of IPA, emphasizing hop aroma and bitterness level that didn't slice your tongue in half. Over time, West Coast style swung back to meet me in terms of bitterness. The interesting thing is I think I swung back to meet it as well, and I think I'm not alone. The data that Matt Harold of Mean Brews collects shows a significant IBU shift over time in bitterness across many non-IPA beer styles. The evolution of IPA in the changed of the IPA has changed our palates, here in America at least, to prefer a higher level of base bitterness. As for me, I'm just happy to be on for the ride. One last thing, I missed the brewed IPA. I don't think people gave it a chance. I've had phenomenal examples of this style, and now it's gone. Fortunately, homebrewing comes to the rescue. We are going to talk about brewed IPA in a minute, so let's not focus on that. But I like what Eric is saying, and I've heard this story from several people, that the advent of the New England / hazy IPA has kind of welcomed a bunch of either, new beer drinkers into the world of beer, but also people who are just burnt out on super bitter, pine sol bombs that the likes of which I was brewing back in the early 2000s up in Bellingham, Washington, that they had something to offer them that really did emphasize what I would contend is the best part of the hops, which is those hop terpenes, those really nice fruity flavors.
Yeah, definitely. And cheers to you, Eric. I haven't heard or seen you in a while. Hope you're well, my friend. And I think over time, our palates do need to kind of reset a little bit, and it's never a bad thing to kind of say, okay, I'm going to not focus so much on hoppy beers right now and kind of take a break and get into, English beers or Belgian beers, or whatever, stouts or whatever. So I think it's a perfectly normal geeky beer thing, right? Where we talk about like taking a break from a certain style or several styles. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, no, I can relate. Even though I don't share the experience of Hazy, when Hazy IPA turned into the thing that was, taking over tap handles from West Coast IPA, I found myself doing what I think Hazy IPA lovers were doing 10, 15 years ago, which was reaching for a different style.
Yes.
And I think that's cool. That's totally cool with me. I'm not angry about that. So
not at all.
Now, as we think about beers that are defined by the way they look, you can't help but, focus a little bit, at least, on the fact that there is a beer style or an IPA sub-style for every color of the rainbow. So we're going to spend a minute here kind of go shotgun style going through the different colors of IPA that have come out. One of the first ones that I remember was black IPA. And in fact, I'll never forget the first time I drank Firestone Walker has their, what's it called? Their black IPA was, I forget the name of it now. I've talked about it in past episodes, but it's like a black rye IPA. It's phenomenal. They don't,
good.
Wookie Jack. It's called Wookie Jack.
That's it.
It's so good. But that is one of the only black IPAs I've ever had that I actually enjoyed. And I've brewed several batches trying to make one that I like. It is not a style that again, in the similar vein as my opinions on Belgian IPA, there's something about that roasty character with that bitterness and the hops that just kind of clashes for me. There's a weird soapy, like a metallic soapiness I get from that I'm not a big fan of. Now,
do you like cilantro?
I actually don't taste soap and cilantro, but my sister does.
Good.
She has whatever genetic marker that is.
Yes, that's what I was wondering.
But there's an interesting thing with black IPA that people will say is, well, then don't use, highly roasted grains or grains that are known for contributing a roast character. Use, Carafa Special so that you don't get that roast character. And then I'm looking and going, well, if your argument is that black IPA is just regular IPA that's black and doesn't have any of the flavors associated with black beer, why not just make a pale IPA then? Like, what if we were just doing it for looks? I don't see the point. So for me, if I'm making a black IPA, I'm going to throw some chocolate malt or some roasted barley or whatever at it, because the idea is to make it taste different. It's to distinguish it from a classic American West Coast hazy IPA. And that's how you do that. Again, not my favorite. I would drink 5 pints of this before I drank a full pint of Belgian IPA or milkshake IPA. But again, it's just not my favorite melding of flavors.
I am a big fan of black IPAs. I think me and Will kind of share that sentiment, along with the use of rye in a lot of our beers. And I think for me, I don't see a lot of black IPAs out there anymore. I used to be on a huge kick with those. And at one point in time, I kind of ruined it for myself because I associate black IPAs with the beer that I brew called Juxtaposed. And it was a beer that I've released the recipe, I think, for patrons, Brülosophy. And it's a beer that actually uses Ethiopian coffee from Starbucks, of all places. And I know that's the big dirty word in the world these days.
They're the Miller Lite of coffee, pal. Don't worry about it with me.
Right.
I don't care.
No, I know. And they had this Ethiopian coffee on that they were serving one morning. I was leaving the gym and going to work, and I grabbed coffee on my way to work, and I was sipping it in my car, and it was like I was drinking an IPA, and it was like this huge grapefruit bomb, and it was wonderful. And I'm like, so I racked my brain the entire day at work, intermittently while teaching children, like, I need to get this Ethiopian coffee into a beer, but what beer style is it going to be? It can't be a stout. It can't be a porter. There's just too dark, but I do want it to be dark. And then black IPA came to my mind, and it was like this, like the heavens opening up and like moment, and Juxtaposed was born. And now every time I think of black IPA, I associate it with my own beer. So
that's awesome.
It is awesome. It's a good story. But at the same time, I've always noveled at the stories that people would associate with beer. Like before I became a contributor, hearing your stories and other people's stories about beer, I'm like, I don't have stories about beer. they come over time, and they do develop, and they become, larger than life sometimes. But yeah, black IPAs are always near and dear to my heart. I love them.
Well, and I think your name for that beer recipe that we did share with patrons, it's available on the website if you are a patron of Brülosophy, is perfect. And it's that juxtaposition of the roasty black with the fruity hops, and it just doesn't work for me, and that's fine. I shouldn't say it doesn't work for me. I can enjoy a full pint of black IPA if it's made well. In fact, just to mention a local homebrewer, Scotty B, if you're listening, what up, buddy? I remember, 14, 15 years ago, the fact that I remember this, I think speaks volumes. He brought a growler of a black IPA that he made to a homebrew club meeting. And I remember he pouring me a sample, and then I walked away. He was pouring samples at a table. I walk away to a group of friends, and I was like, guys, you got to try this. It's pretty good. I've had, this was back in the day where black IPA was blowing up. So now we did get a comment. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. James Splinter, patron James Splinter, says, Cascadian Dark Ale for the win. Why am I including that here? Yeah, black IPA is there. There's a whole group of people who say that black IPA was basically invented in the Pacific Northwest, and they fought to have it called Cascadian Dark Ale, I believe. I've always just stuck with black IPA, though I'll call it whatever the majority of people want to call it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Cascadian Dark Ale?
I've always laughed at the people who took it way too serious. But yeah, I mean, whatever you want to call it, black IPA, Cascadian black IPA, or, you add a slash in between the two, kind of like, it's kind of like the hazy IPA slash, any IPA, type thing, and people would, once they get accustomed to something, they gravitate towards that or hang on to that idea, that label. One that doesn't really get into labels all that much. I kind of appreciate it just being beer. But I understand the sake of naming beer, styles and whatnot. So I get that. That's not going to be the cross that I die on. By any means.
Well, let's move on then, because there are more color IPAs out there.
Yes, more variety.
More variety. I'm so curious of what your thoughts are on red IPA.
I love a good red IPA, if I can talk correctly. I've always liked red ales, Irish red ales, American red ales, whatever you want to call it. Hell, I've even brewed a Belgian red IPA or Belgian red ale before with a little bit of rye. That turned out pretty decent. And I like it. I think when it's done really well, it really stands out. And if it's crystal clear, which I know some of my beers don't always come out crystal clear, I'm guilty of that. I do think that it does look pretty damn sexy, and don't automatically gravitate towards that verbiage or that adjective rather for beer. I can't stand it, actually, and part of me is sickened that I even went there, but it does. it does have a look.
It's beautiful.
It does have a good look to it, though, and when it's done well, when it's you have good hops that are like really carefully thought of and balanced, I think it's a really good style. What do you think?
Yep, you kind of spoke exactly what I was thinking. I genuinely love red IPA, and here's the weird thing about it. Again, Midwest IPA, not my favorite. It leans a little bit too heavily into the sweet malty thing. Mm-hmm. Red IPA to me strikes the balance. It should be, in my opinion, very dry, but it has that malt character that you associate with a good red beer, and by which I mean kind of a toffee, but it doesn't overdo it. Again, I have had red IPA that were overdone. To me, they fit more into that kind of Midwest East Coast style IPA. A good red IPA, which we cannot talk about this style without talking about Celebration Ale from Sierra Nevada. Now, here's the thing. Celebration Ale, there are people out there who view that beer as being the quintessential American IPA. Think about that. Let that marinate for a second. That is a red beer. The fact that we now have IPA that ranges in color from, basically Pilsner yellow all the way up to stout black, I think is really cool. Red IPA strikes that balance for me. And one of the things that I feel, at least for in my opinion, that I feel really works well with red IPA is using hops that tend to have that kind of higher CoH bitterness, that a little bit sharper of a bitterness to balance the sweetness that comes from those malts that you use, but also a little bit more piney, kind of old school grapefruity hops also work really well because you don't need to stack the sweet. This is, again, purely my opinion here, but you're already contributing sweetness from the malt. The part I struggle with certain types of like Midwest IPA is that then you're adding on hop character that is also perceptibly sweet, like fruity sweet. To me, it gets cloying. Red IPA, yes, absolutely. Lean into that citrus, but also balance it with some Chinook, some Simcoe, something that's known for having a little bit of pine with the more classic citrus characteristics of hops. That to me, I mean, some of the best IPA I've ever had have been red IPA. I'm looking forward to next month. I believe it's next month that Sierra Nevada starts dropping Celebration Ale, and I drink the shit out of that beer whenever it comes out. Like, I drink more Celebration Ale in the 2 or 3 months that it's out, on the market, probably than I do any other IPA all added together throughout the rest of the year. That's how much I love it.
One of the things that I love about being a contributor with Brülosophy, and I've said this over and over again to friends, is the sense of camaraderie and friendship that we have. And that in any given moment, we can always text each other and say, what's up? Or snap a picture of our first case of Celebration Ale, and you know it's coming. You know it's coming. You feel, speaking of as a true Midwesterner, you feel the Christmas in the air. We talk about romanticizing beer here. Yeah, you feel the Christmas of the air. It's not very light out. It's getting darker, or maybe it's a little cloudy and overcast, and you get that first go round of Celebration Ale into stores, into liquor store, and God damn it, things are good.
It's almost like a competition, Steve. I feel like among our, and it's not even just our crew. This happens with my local home brewing friends. Sure. It's like, who's the first one? Who's gonna show that they saw it first? Yeah.
Yep. It's like that badge of honor, right?
Yeah.
That you get. It's like, it's a rite of passage, every year. It's just something about it. And I think what Red IPA does for me is it brings you to that line, and it stops right at that line of it being too overly sweet. And then it brings you back to the bitterness, and it brings you back to those wonderful Chinook, Simcoe hops that are just giving you enough bitterness to make you want to come back and drink another one and another one. It's just a wonderful beer, and it's a wonderful style.
Yeah. A little side story here. I made a red IPA. It was after the first time I had Sierra Nevada Celebration. So this must have been, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And I'm thinking, I'll just design a recipe that I think kind of goes along with what I was tasting there. I did so. The beer comes out, and it tasted good. People were drinking it. They were enjoying it. No complaints. But I'm sitting there drinking it going, there's just something missing, and I can't quite put my finger on it. So I shared it with a friend of mine who I really trust their assessment of beer. And we're both, judges. We got our BJCP. We did our test together and all that stuff. And he drinks it and he goes, you know what I think it needs? He goes, what did you bitter it with? I said, Magnum. I just bitter everything with Magnum. He goes, blend in. He goes, just for fun, make the same exact recipe. Take, let's say I use like 20 grams of Magnum at 60 minutes. He goes, just cut that in half and fill in the rest. So, 10 grams of Magnum, 10 grams of Chinook. And I was like, that's interesting. And he's like, don't do anything else. He goes, I'm really curious what you think and how it changes it. Sure enough, that little dose of Chinook contributed this. It was exactly what that beer needed. It added that just that sharpness that maybe in a paler IPA just kind of doesn't fit or
Right.
kind of leans into that Pacific Northwest thing. No, it was like exactly what it needed. And so that's why I say it does really well with some of those older classic American C hops. And that's what I love about it. Now, what are your thoughts? I feel like this is a good segue into brown IPA, which is another colored IPA. To me, when I think of brown IPA, it does kind of diverge from the red IPA sweetness and starts to go a little bit more. It starts to tickle that black IPA roasty thing, which again, I've had some. My favorite. I was really lucky back in, I believe, February of 2014. February or March, right around the time Brülosophy was getting off the ground. My family and another family, we all went out to Windsor, Santa Rosa area of California, which we all know what brewery is in Santa Rosa. It's Russian River. And they happened to have, Tasty's Janet's Brown Ale on tap. They had made a collaboration with Tasty, rest in peace, Tasty.
Rest in peace, Tasty.
It was, I remember drinking this beer and being like, whoa, my idea of what a brown IPA is just changed. And I've made Tasty's recipe and it is so good. What he does well is balance out the roasty characters that you'd expect from a darker beer so that it doesn't come across as sharp or as, that roasty bitterness. It's really good. That said, probably the majority of brown IPA that I've tasted, not a big fan of.
Yeah, I can't help but think of like various types of brown IPAs that I've tasted from home brewers, I think mostly, just didn't really kind of fit the bill. And I kind of keep on thinking about this murkiness. So whenever I see the words brown IPA, I think murky. And there's got to be an association there somewhere.
Does it rhyme with diarrhea? Yeah.
Maybe. And it's just
Gross.
not appealing, but I do love, I have had Janet's Brown Ale at some homebrew con years ago, and I enjoyed it, and I think it's really well done, and I think I do enjoy a good brown ale, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Again, kind of like the red ale, where you're kind of getting away from the traditional idea of what an IPA has to be, but you're still not totally divorced from it, and you're still kind of hanging on to the IPA idea, but you're just introducing new characters into the scene, which to me is a beautiful thing about homebrewing, that you can do something like that. And it's a style that I would definitely want to brew. I've never brewed a brown IPA before. So maybe that's something that I can add to my list of brews to come in the future.
Yeah, and I'll tell anybody who's interested in brewing brown IPA or trying it, I mean, just go Google, Tasty McDole Janet's Brown Ale recipe. I don't usually, make such strong recommendations. Whatever he did, he talked about multiple iterations trying to make a beer that, I believe it was his wife, Janet, would like this brown IPA, and that's what he settled on. And there's good reason that he did. Check out that recipe. Now, again, final, I know this isn't all of them, but final color-based IPA out there. I feel like we kind of have to mention it. We don't need to spend too much time on it, but white IPA, which in my opinion, now there might be people out there who disagree, differs from Belgian IPA in that it kind of is modeled a bit more after wit beer than Belgian ale. And, wit beer is that really, tends to be a bit hazier, kind of like a Weiss beer, a Hefeweizen, if you will. White IPA. I've probably tried 4 or 5 commercial examples. I don't think it's around much anymore these days. And I'm not sad about that, because I felt like it was one of the worst versions of IPA that I ever had.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time thinking if this guy John from the Chaos Homebrew Club in Chicago, who I met several years ago, and I had an experience with Chaos last summer serving beer with them. I don't know if it was a white IPA or if it was a Belgian IPA that he brewed. It was really well done. and I seem to think that it might have been a white IPA, but it was damn good. I think it was the only one I've ever had, any white IPA I've ever had. Definitely not a style that is very popular at all. I like the idea of meshing two styles together. So like a wit beer, like a hoppier version of a wit beer. I like that idea. I think it's very creative, and I've always, with some buddies of mine from the homebrew club, I've always wanted to do like a dark Kolsch, right? Like just a black Kolsch, which would get the Germans all riled up and, want to just destroy me for destroying a classic style. But I think that kind of stuff is fun as a home brewer. That's stuff that's what keeps me interested in brewing these days. So I can definitely get down with that.
Yeah. No, again, for the people who enjoy those, combination of flavors, by all means, make a white IPA. Just basically design the palest version of an IPA you can imagine and ferment it with wit beer yeast. And there you have it. Not my thing, but I'm also, wit beer is not my favorite style either. So,
exactly.
All right. So those are the colorful IPAs that we're going to focus on today. We are moving into our kind of final segment here, our final section of IPA. And it's what I labeled in my neurotic ways, other. So it's those things that don't really, they might be ingredient based. There are a couple of IPA subtypes that just don't fit the categories that we've already mentioned. Again, so I clumped them together here at the end because I felt like they were still deserving of attention at least. Now, these beers tend to be defined by things like their prominent characteristics or the ingredients used to make them. We're just going to focus on 3 of them here. The first one is brewed IPA, which our friend Eric mentioned earlier. And I agree with him that if done well, brewed IPA can be phenomenally good. Thanks to Kim Sturdivant, by the way, for inventing this style when he was at the Social Kitchen and Brewery out in San Francisco. It's a really interesting style defined almost wholly by its dryness. I mean, how insanely dry this beer is. The idea was to make kind of a champagne-esque type of IPA, meaning very dry, strong hop characteristics. A lot of people I know who are making good versions of brewed IPA were using hops like Nelson Sauvin, which is known for that kind of gooseberry, winey flavor that it can contribute. I've also had some absolutely awful versions made by excellent breweries. I hated the Sierra Nevada brewed IPA that came out. I thought it was nasty. But the ones that I had that I liked, for example, from a local brewery here called Riley's Brewing, back when my buddy Mike Samaya was designing and brewing their beers for them, was phenomenal. So a really neat style that, like Eric mentioned, isn't popular much anymore. But what are your thoughts on it?
It's a style that kind of escaped me. I didn't really gravitate towards it, and I don't really have much experience drinking them, and definitely no experience brewing them. And I don't exactly know why.
You like Midwest IPA, Steve. That's why. It is like the opposite of Midwest IPA.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, I can understand the flavor profile, and I can kind of get down with that. But I don't know. I definitely don't see any commercial versions of it. Maybe it was at a time when I was just so focused on other styles. I don't know. Maybe rye IPA. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about rye IPA then, because I feel like that's one that you're going to have some opinions about.
Yeah, I mean, rye IPA. If it were up to me, I would include rye in almost every one of my recipes. To be honest with you, it's just something that, and I've heard someone say in some forum years ago that Munich should always be in every style, and I somewhat believe that Munich malt should be in almost every style. Now, you might disagree. That's fine. I think rye can also be considered to be in every style. But I don't know, just something about it. Just it fits with my palate. I think done really well with a combination of hops, specifically Mosaic. I think Mosaic does a really good job with pairing well with the earthiness of rye malt. Which I just love. I love the combination of the two, and something that I would like to brew over and over again.
I will tell you this, that so I mention it all the time, and I'm going to mention it again. To my tastes, Rye does not contribute spiciness to beer. We can just leave that behind. What it contributes is a really nice mouthfeel. It adds this level of viscosity to beer that can really, without making it sweet, and it's just a really, really cool ingredient. The best pale ale that I've ever made. That one might classify as an IPA. Only reason I call it a pale, it was basically an IPA that I dry hopped it. It did all that stuff. I just made it like 5.2% ABV, so I'm calling it a pale ale. Was a 25% rye, I believe, rye malt. Pale ale, and it was phenomenal. Not spicy at all, but it was so good. I absolutely love rye IPA. I think one of the issues that some people might have, I know that some people do because I've talked to people like this, might have with rye IPA is, at what point does a regular IPA where you're using rye malt or even flaked rye or some form of rye as an adjunct, sort of just a part of the recipe, where does it turn into a rye IPA? Is there a certain percentage? I don't know what that is. If I'm using 20+% of rye in an IPA, I'm probably cool with calling it a rye IPA in some way. But I've also made, standard West Coast IPA with 5-10% of rye malt just for the mouthfeel and body, and I don't, that doesn't strike me as a rye IPA necessarily, but regardless, rye, it just fits with IPA. As you said, I think it goes in so many styles. It's such a multi-tool in brewing in terms of malt. And I absolutely love it. So rye IPA, it sounds like you and I are on the same page. I've talked to people who claim to hate rye beers because they think it's too spicy. And I'm always like, man, I don't know what you're doing differently than I am, but I just do not get spice from rye beers. The final other IPA that I want to talk about before we wrap this up, we're going to do some more patron comments, of course, but is fruited IPA. There's not much that I can say about this. The coolest thing about IPA to me, especially modern versions of IPA, is that they taste fruity without there being fruit in there. There's something kind of magical about that. When you add fruits like watermelon or mango, even habanero, which I suppose is sort of a fruit, it just, to me, it feels adulterated, and I'm not a big fan of it. Again, I'll drink a sample if somebody I have friends who make fruited IPA all the time. I'm gonna taste it. I'm gonna drink some. Just, it's not. I've made one fruited IPA. I wasn't a big fan of it, and I'll probably not make another one. That's where I'm at. Yeah, I've never been too much into adding fruit to my beers. I know my friend Mike really does like to add fruit to beers. He will, break down a 10-gallon batch and add, different fruits to different versions of the beer and stuff like that. I get it, and it's just not for me. I will definitely indulge and have some and try it. Just for me, it's just not something I gravitate towards. I always go back to a good friend of mine said years ago when I was throwing different ideas at him about brewing beer. He always was like, Steve, would you drink a 5-gallon batch of that? And those words have stuck with me for over 10 years now that 11 years now as I've been brewing. And it still holds true today, where that's the marker of that on which I want to know, am I going to drink the full 5 gallons of it, or am I just going to be indulgent and, obsessive over something and just brew it. And then if it doesn't come out, oh well. But yeah, I don't really brew much with fruit these days. I'm with you. So, but I'll definitely try it. I mean, 21st Amendment's watermelon beer was pretty decent. I like that. I don't see myself, wanting to have a full case of it or like brew a version of it myself. But, one or two, it's fine. That's good. Well, and, first off, you mentioned 21st Amendment. They just announced that they'll be going out of business as well. Hell or High Watermelon was one of those beers that really, I think, got them on the map, and good for them on that. I actually somewhat enjoyed Hell or High Watermelon, but here's the thing. We talked about Sculpin earlier. Sculpin now, when you say Sculpin to another beer drinker, they're probably going to think of one of their fruited versions of that beer. Right. Again, more power to you. The fact that they've gone commercial with that and that it seems to be doing well, I think speaks volumes to the fact that there are people out there who love it. And that's what I love the most. So, all right, let's get to our final set of patron comments here. The first one comes from Michael Piazzoni, who says, Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale is a true American IPA, and it's pretty dark, but brilliantly clear. I also love Blind Pig and Pliny the Elder, each tending to be lighter than the beer that came before it. Yeah, Michael, I agree with you. I don't know if I'd classify Celebration Ale as a true American IPA. That to me solidly fits in the camp of red IPA these days, but that's influenced by my awareness of these different, subtypes of IPA.
Definitely share the same sentiment and love for Celebration Ale. I've never had Blind Pig. Of course, Pliny is incredible. I actually, when you were talking about going to an English pub in Minneapolis, I was in an English pub in Portland the year after for HomebrewCon and had my first, or actually second, pint of Pliny the Elder there. So interesting that I got to indulge in a English bar for Pliny, but very good beer. But yeah, Celebration. Can't wait for it to come out again.
Oh, you and me both. All right. Next comment comes from Marcus Rossler, who says, I was never a fan of IPAs. I found them way too bitter. I tried some hazy IPA, and that was my gateway into the world of IPA, where I'm slowly expanding my horizon. Yet again, just another example that, as much as some people might hate the evolution of a specific style, it is bringing more people over to the dark side, as I like, to the hoppy side. And yes. I think for that, it's more than worth it.
Rock on, Marcus. I do agree with you there that the expanding my horizons part is one that I gravitate towards in your comment. Keep expanding, keep trying and new varieties and new styles, because there's an endless amount of beer out there.
There's an endless amount of IPA out there. It's wild. So, all right, final comment comes from Bill Lammers, who says, one of the best IPAs I've ever experienced was a red rye IPA brewed here in the Cedar Rapids area at Clockhouse Brewing. Shout out to Clockhouse. It was a beautiful shade of red, crystal clear, and very clean with what I guessed were Pacific Northwest hops like Cascade, Centennial, etc. The brewer was not in the house that day, so we never really found out, but we just really liked it. My co-drinker that day, and I were getting into the weeds about rye beer versus a rye IPA versus a red IPA, and we guessed it was really up to the brewer, as all things like this usually are. I know the style guidelines, but how easy is it to determine the lines between styles that are so closely related? Or does it just come down to taste, enjoyment, and those other fluffy things that us beer drinkers enjoy so much? I agree with you, Bill, but the one point that I want to make here is that I like that Bill pointed out something that I said earlier. It's kind of validating that this delicious version of a red rye IPA that Bill and his co-drinker had, he feels was probably hopped with these more classic C hops, Pacific Northwest hops, as he refers to them, that I do feel lend more of a piney, grapefruity thing as opposed to that real citrusy, a tropical fruit, stone fruit type of deal. And it just works with red IPA. And that's just something I'm going to stick with. So thanks for the validation, Bill.
I will preface this comment by saying that I am currently putting a note in my phone for naming a beer Bill's co-drinker. So guys, look for a new beer in Brülosophy named Bill's co-drinker. It'll be a shout out to Bill Lammers here for his awesome comment. Yeah, I like it. It's co-drinkers are always needed, and this whole idea of a rye IPA and rye beer and red IPAs, like how just mesh them all together and come up with something that you like and add those interesting Pacific Northwest hops. That's what makes homebrewing so much fun.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, Bill's co-drinker has to be a red rye IPA. So I'm giving you that right now. That does bring us to the end of this episode. Those are all of our opinions on the smattering of substyles of IPA that we could think of. I'm sure we left some off. If you have thoughts and opinions on IPA, and I know you do, feel free to drop them on all of our social media, any of our social media. You can shoot us an email at feedback@brülosophy.com. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Brülosophy Show, at youtube.com/@The Brülosophy Show. That's the @ symbol followed by The Brülosophy Show. You don't need to use the umlaut there. If you're listening to this podcast, we're confident you're going to love the videos Martin's creating over at YouTube as well. And make sure to head to Brülosophy.com to stay current on all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to Brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/Brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman. No